Hi, welcome to Weird Fox. So today I'm going to be picking up a project that I started back towards the end of 2023, and like all of my projects, it got shoved in a cupboard and completely forgotten about. Anyway, let's see if I could get this finished.
So this is where I got up to with my castle ruin before it started gathering dust. It started its life as a yoghurt pot that I cut to shape and glued down to some XPS foam. The bricks were then made by hacking at some more foam with absolutely no precision whatsoever, as you can see by the state of all these walls. And then the floorboard situation is also not looking too cracking. I tried to take a shortcut and just use some card and it did not pay off, it doesn't look good. So I'll be replacing with some wooden sticks that I'll cut down to size. And then to go with my castle is this absolute whopper of a tree with no scale to it whatsoever. I made it from some armature wire that I bent into shape, wrapped with tin foil and then squished down to give this knobbly bobbly bark effect. I then covered it in a layer of Mod Podge and gave a layer of base paint. I'm not too sure what I'm going to do with these smaller branches and foliage at the top, but I'll worry about that later. So my first step was to finish off the castle walls by cutting out some more bricks and sticking those to the walls. I used Mod Podge again, but in hindsight I probably would choose a different type of glue or adhesive because it has quite a long cure time, and so the bricks just kept falling off, which was quite annoying. While that was drying, I moved on to the tree and gave it a couple of layers of dark brown paint to cover up all the tin foil underneath. I then moved on to a dark brown black wash. You can't see, but there's a little pot of water that I was using to dilute it down. I then moved on to a dry brush with a much lighter shade just to bring out some of the highlights. While the tree was drying, I decided to move on to tackling the floorboards and removing all the cardboard. Once I'd removed the cardboard, I moved on to adding a layer of Mod Podge to where the floorboards will go and the top layer of bricks that I recently added. I then started chopping the wooden sticks down to size and Mod Podging them to the surface to create the floorboards. I then brought out my trusty rock to start bashing the surface of the bricks to create a more rocky, stony texture. I should have done this before I added lots of layers of Mod Podge. It would have been a lot easier, but I'm not a sensible person, so I didn't. Using a mix of filler, sand and PVA glue, I made a gloopy porridge mix to cover all of the foam, which will give it so much more texture, fill a lot of the gaps from my wonky brickwork, and also act as a great base for priming.
So it's now rock hard, primed and ready for paint. I'm really happy with how the filler, sand and glue mix came out. It's given this really lovely rocky texture and a really good base for the primer as well. I'm also really happy that I changed the cardboard floorboards for these wooden sticks here. I did forget to scratch in the wooden pattern. I should have done it before I did the Mod Podge and primer layer, but I'll do it now. I'm not exactly sure how these floorboards would have survived when everything else has crumbled into a ruin, but it has, so we'll just leave it at that. My next step then is to paint this. So I'm going to do a dark grey coat around the castle, and then I'm going to start picking out some individual bricks to do in different shades, just because when you look at stone, it's all kinds of different colours. It's not just one flat shade of grey, there's all kinds of different colours in there. So just to give it a more realistic look, I'll be picking out some bricks and making those a different colour, and then going over the whole thing with a black wash just to get in all these little nooks and crannies. That really does help add a lot of depth. So that's the step for the castle. The base, I'll just go over with a dark green, and then my plan is to add quite a bit of flock, grass and things all around the sides, add a little path in here. And you might be able to just see that I've also dug out a hole in the middle, and that is for an LED. So I've got one of those flickering tea lights here. Prized the plastic off, got the tea light, and I'm going to fit that into the base and build a fire around it. And then for my tree, use some of these sticks that I hacked from a poor-dead plant, of which there are many in my garden. And I'm going to chop these up into smaller twigs, and then use some kind of glue, maybe UV resin, to stick those onto the bigger branches. And then for the foliage, what I'll do is I'll use some moss, stick that all over, and hopefully that'll give it a nice realistic-ish looking tree. But I'll be doing that later, so for now I will crack on with the painting.
Now at this point, some of you might be thinking, oh my god, what's she doing? She's totally f***ed it. But honestly, once the black wash and dry brushing of the lighter colours comes in, it does start to look better. I started creating the little fire by painting the plastic base of the LED with a darkish colour, and then cutting out some wooden sticks to act as the firewood, and then gave them a coat of brown paint. I then started gluing them as best as possible to the plastic, but it was faffy to say the least. But once the glue had started curing, it became much easier to manage, and I also added some bits of dead twigs and things to try and give it a more realistic appearance. I mean, it might look good from a distance, hopefully. To create the flame effect, I used clear silicone sealant that I just moulded around the LED and then left to cure overnight. Then it'll be ready for painting. To create the path, I mixed in some pencil shavings with some watered down brown paint, mixed it all together, then started smushing it onto where the path will be and left that to dry overnight. Moving on to the tree, I used UV resin to stick bits of dead twigs onto the bigger branches, and then unfortunately the battery in my UV torch started to die, so the resin just wasn't curing quite fast enough and started to get all over my bare hands, so don't be silly like me and wear gloves. By by this point it wasn't looking quite how I'd imagined, but I just reminded myself that I'll be covering it up with lots of moss, so you won't be able to see it anyway. I'm actually really happy with how the tree ended up turning out. Is it the most realistic looking tree? Not quite, but I think it looks like an old wizened tree that you might find leant up against an old castle ruin, so yeah, I'm pretty happy with it. I then started to get everything ready for adding all the decoration and scenery. So I had the leaf litter, some flocking and some mossy green paint and these little flowers as well, and some little grass tufts. So I started off by marking out where I was going to be adding the flock to the side of the castle using the green paint. And while the paint dried, I used some of this leaf litter to scatter across the path, and this is just some leaves that I've collected or harvested from another dead plant. And then I fixed that all in place with some scenic glue. I added a layer of PVA glue over where I'd marked out with the mossy green coloured paint, so that I could then start applying the flock all over. Once I'd finished with the flocking, I started adding lots of little grass tufts and the flowers all around the castle base. Before adding the static grass, I decided exactly where I wanted the tree to be, so that I could then start putting the PVA glue down, ready for the grass. Now, I've never used a static grass applicator before, so just listen out for me jumping out of my skin when I discharge the static at the end of the application. Yeah, I wasn't quite prepared for that and banged into my desk. Off camera, I painted up these little barrels and a crate that I've had for quite some time and thought would look perfect on this diorama. Once I'd glued those into position, I realised I'd completely forgotten to paint the sides of the base. I should have done this before I added everything, especially the flock, but my brain really doesn't like to do things in order, it seems, so doing it now. Once the base was finally painted, I could stick the tree down onto the base, and I also added some extra grass tufts around the tree. last thing to do was to paint up the fire, so I grabbed two translucent-ish colours from Citadel, an orange and a red, and just applied those over the flames. I was quite happy with how this fire turned out. As long as you don't get too close, I think it looks, you know, fairly passable for a fire anyway. I couldn't resist adding a few final details, and then I thought I'm just going to have to finish this project finally, and so let's just see how it's actually turned out. If you stuck around to the end of the video, then thank you so much for watching. It really means a lot. This is my first ever video and I hope to make loads more. If you liked the video, then please consider a like and a subscribe. It'll really help my new channel out. But yeah, thank you again for watching and see you next time.